Another classic John Steinbeck interlude chapter where we zoom out from the story and we go up to 20,000 feet and we look at the world, or maybe California, or maybe Salinas, and we don't seem to be advancing the plot at all, yet we can advance the plot not by going forward sometimes, but by going up and getting an aerial view of the matter, and so that's what we do here in the 46th chapter. So first thing he says is unseasonably wet, and it's raining more in November. Remember, a couple chapters ago, the gift at the Trask household was going to be given on Thanksgiving. And remember, Kathy is on Thanksgiving Eve worried about the information that Joe relayed to her. So the last couple chapters have been pointing toward this last week of November, this Thanksgiving week. And Steinbeck notes that all of the Novembers of America's participation in World War I were wet years. And I don't know any connection, but it just forces me to remember all the way back to chapter 1 when he's remembering the Salinas Valley. And he says people forget the wet years when it's the dry years, and when it's the dry years, people forget the wet years. And so I think that the point all the way back then between remembering and forgetting is we lack wisdom when we think that it'll never rain again, or when we think that it will always rain. And maybe he means that metaphorically here, that in a season of war, maybe you think that it's always going to be like this, or in a season of peace, you're going to think it's always like this. Anyway, I just make that connection somehow. And then he says, speaking of connections, he says some people even made the connection between the wet November months and the war going on in Europe. Again, that's a concept way back at the beginning of the novel, what we call nowadays the butterfly effect, that one event, one place, affects everything else another place. And so in some of Steinbeck's later works, but all dating back to the earliest works that I've read of his, which I guess are his first published works, he has the almost pantheistic idea that everything is connected in a way that most people don't see that everything is connected. And so he reports that, and it sounds kind of weird, but it almost reflects seeming to be a little bit of what Steinbeck himself believed, that events in one continent could have an effect on events in another continent. Then he moves on to a General Pershing, a name that I had heard before, but I went ahead and read his Wikipedia page and couldn't find anything especially helpful to this novel. But rather, just within the novel, as I thought about General Pershing and the confidence that people placed in just the way he looked, how he was all buttoned up and he seemed like a man with a plan. Steinbeck notes, nobody actually knew what his plan was or knew what he believed, but just the look of the guy gave people confidence. Well, that of course made me think of Mr. Cyrus Trask and how he had everyone fooled in his post-Civil War career that he looked the part. And so I don't think he's imputing that to Pershing, but just saying that will get you a long way when it comes to military, when it comes to war enthusiasm. If you have a general who just looks the part, that goes a long way. Then he goes back to Salinas and looks at the war effort, and both men and women are contributing. So economically, people are contributing tons and tons of the right kind of flour. Men over 50 are exercising a couple times a week to get ready. These men are all buttoned up and barking orders at each other, and they have uniforms, and people are making leather belts and leather boots, and there's Red Cross ladies, and really just a community-wide, class-free effort to somehow support the war all the way back at home. And then he tells this absolutely heart-wrenching story of Mr. Finchel, a tailor in town, who just unfortunately for him happens to be German at the time of the First World War. And he tells this heart-wrenching story of himself, probably the one episode where Steinbeck himself is most center in the novel. And he and his sister Mary say something anti-German to the man, and the man just stands there and cries. He stands there and bawls, and then the story is even sadder than that, as later on 30 men go and take apart his fence and burn the front of his house down just because of the fact that he is of German descent and speaks with a German accent. And then it gets even sadder than that because it spreads to other towns once they hear about getting rid of these German spies, quote unquote. It spreads to other towns. And so he says, anyway, back in Salinas, we have what reminds me of the spring of 2020 and the part of the year 2021, this cultural crossroads of, well, what's reliable news? What's a reliable news source? And what is with this sudden inflation? And what's with this hoarding? When there's just a rumor that a product that there'll be a shortage of some product, and everyone is at the store fighting over that product. And so some of that ugliness is going on in Salinas as well. But Steinbeck, ever the balanced author, says, but that's not, this was also an occasion for true war heroes. It was an occasion for those who object to war to walk that cross-carrying path, that countercultural path of peace, and so on and so on. And then he closes the chapter with just a little wink back at the Trask-Hamilton households of Cal and Will, and he says, when you're a moneymaker, you make money, and even in war, the moneymaker makes money. And that's okay as long as you're part of the team, as long as you're using that money to support the team. So I think we're supposed to think of old Will Hamilton and Cal Trask and the money they made off their bean scheme, and that's okay that they made money during war, but only if you're on the side of the good old US of A. So buckle in for the next chapter.